This is Tim Cain, my bad game development skills. I bet he's going to talk about how his dialogue writing, I know, and maybe anything artistic. So I'm going to have a lot in common with him, especially after today. We were writing dialogues today.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today, I want to talk about
Hi, old Tim.
game development tasks
Because it's 1 year old.
that I'm
not that
bad
he's old.
at. So, I thought I'd talk about those game development skills that have eluded me over many decades, and that I've finally resolved myself to. You're not going to learn these. You're not going to get better at these. It's better to let someone else do it.
Yep.
So, let me talk about that. So first of all, I think the biggest thing when I look back at my games, it's adding or editing, paring away features. If there's one problem I always have is I want too many system mechanics in one game. I just when I start thinking,
I'm
it's
like
like I
that
want
too.
this, I want this. This one makes sense, but only if you have this one to balance it.
Yep.
We need more of this. There's, hey, I'm worried about this kind of character being made and not being supported, so we need to add this, this, and this. In every one of my games, it adds up to too many system mechanics. I think Arcanum was probably the
I'm going through now, yeah.
ultimate expression of that.
Well, I think with Cauldron Chronicles 2 on this channel that we've been there, right? I think there probably will be some things we have to cut. And it's hard when you're making it's like, well, I know I'm making kind of a life sim, right? And it's like, okay, well, I want the player to have distractions. I want them to have diversions, puzzles and fishing, of course. And we wanted cooking at one point, but that was an easy one to cut because it was easy to prove that it didn't mesh well with the concept of the game. But it's like if you're being inspired by like Stardew Valley to an extent and you want to have these relaxing moments and activities for the player to do, it's very easy just to add systems. I think that you can still do it. What you need to consider then is like gameplay percentages, and you have to take a look at and think about like Stardew, for instance. Okay, Stardew has you have mining, you have combat, you have fishing, you have uh, events that you can attend, you have of course the farming, you have the exploration aspects, and like some secret stuff that's hidden. Well, what percentage of the time that the player is spending playing Stardew is doing something like fishing? Well, if they like it, they might do it more. And is it negatively impacting their ability to make money and grow their farm? Not really. You could argue that it's less efficient, but it isn't negatively impacting them. And I think that the average player for fishing probably doesn't spend more than 10%, maybe 5 to 10% of an average year. Like if we think of let's think of a season in Stardew. They don't spend more than maybe 5 to 10% of that fishing. So if you have all these systems, you have to think, well, what purpose do they serve? Do they help serve the main core pillars of the game? The main gameplay loop, does it help it, with the economy? Does it distract the player from things that they should be doing instead in order to progress? Or is it maybe just a less efficient way to progress, but one that is enjoyable and one that doesn't take away from the things that are more important in your gameplay loop, right? Like fishing in Cauldron Chronicles. Okay, you get ingredients, you get fish. You can use fish to make potions. Maybe you can fish up some junk or some loot or whatever, but it's still feeding into the alchemy. You're still getting ingredients, and it's distracting the player from what else would they be doing? Exploring. Okay, well, if they don't want to explore, they can just fish. If they don't want to fish, they can explore. These things serve each other, and you have to think about that. But it is really easy that I still see game designers who are pretty competent at what they do not consider gameplay percentages, not consider, is this feature sabotaging the gameplay loop in some way? Is it actively assisting it? How much time is it taking away from the player? Does the player want to be doing something else right now that they should be doing, but because they have to do this thing, or they feel like they need to do this thing to progress, is that taking them away from that? A good example is like hunting in Red Dead Redemption 2. You can beat the entire game without really doing any hunting in Red Dead 2. You don't need to do it. All it does is give you some, more efficient ways to shoot things, gives you access to more ammo, maybe some cosmetics. But the hunting is fun, and you can do it, and it doesn't detract from the rest of the gameplay because you're getting unlocks that assist in your gameplay. And that's what I love to do in games. It's the same thing. You give me an open world game like Red Dead 2, and it's like, okay, you've completed the tutorial missions. Now you can go off and explore the open world. Okay, see you in 100 hours when I'm max level and then come back to do the main quest. Do everything else that's not related to the main gameplay loop. Yep, that's me. Time to go maximize all my gear and then come back and do the main quest. Oh, you give me this revolver as like the first main mission in the game? Okay, but I have all the other guns in the game right now, so... Oops, maybe I should have done this mission earlier.
Where if there was an idea that anybody had, it went into Arcanum. And Arcanum just had everything. I mean, it had... you picked races and attributes and skills and backgrounds, and there was magic and tech and companions and summoned companions. Just
that is a lot.
If we had an idea, it went in there. But it wasn't just that. Like Temple of Elemental Evil is a good example of when I told them I didn't think we should.
It's not a bad thing. I mean, what he's saying is a dangerous thing, right? We take a look at like Wayward Realms. We talk about that a lot. That's the game that is being made by it had a Kickstarter made by the developers of Daggerfall. They want to make it essentially Daggerfall 2 Electric Boogaloo, and it promises all this shit. And to me, that's dangerous. That's a red flag. But of course, if you can do it, players will like it, right? Like Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous. If anybody's ever played Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous, let me pull up the character creator real quick. It's one of my favorite character creators. Let's just watch this one.
Pathfinder.
Let me boost up the. You have up here. It's a little hard to see. You have character, portrait. You have race, background selection, abilities, skills, feats, deities, different things based on all these different classes and subclasses that you have in the game. You know, some of them will have some special feature, right? And you have all these things that you can choose. It gets wild. It gets wild. It's very in-depth. I really, really love it. But the game reacts to that. The gameplay matters because of all these things that you choose. All the little bonuses, all the little boosts, the ways that you can roleplay as exactly the kind of character and subclass that you want. It's great. It's really well made. I love doing it. It's just kind of fun to interact with. But if you don't have that reactivity in the game, then it's like your character creator doesn't mean anything. Having companions doesn't mean anything if your companions don't react or don't really add much to the game. It's basically scope creep. It is. But I like scope creep. I was able to hone my skills in order to become capable of actually creating all the things I need. Yeah, it's like... I mean, people come on to channel, they say, oh, Cauldron Chronicles, that's a really, really ambitious game. Well, it is, but it's not. I don't think it's that crazily ambitious. It's just like, well, it's ambitious. It's not like a game that's trying to do too much. We're not trying to have cooking. We're not trying to have sword play and wizardry stuff into the game. We don't have like all these 20 different cities in the game that you can visit. No, there's no cities in the game that you can visit. You're out in the wilds, you know, and that's how we can manage the scope a little bit. You know, it's like world size in our game doesn't matter. What I care about is the quality of the world that we make. And if the world is big and has the depth that I envision, great. If it's smaller and has the depth that I envision, great. All I care about is that what we create has that depth, has that reactivity. Most people fear scope creep. I embrace it. I was molded by it. Okay, Bane.
To do paladins and bards and maybe druids.
But scope is something. It's different when you're like a hobbyist or an indie dev. But when you work in a professional team and you have like a publisher, you have that daddy that you're, you know, licking the balls of, right? You do need to consider scope and what your team is capable of. So that's why not all indie devs can work great in professional settings, and not all professional, you know, individuals can work great on like an indie level. There's different requirements and expectations.
because they were too specialized of classes, and Atari pushed back and said, no, we need to have them. I should have said, that's not something you're getting in 18 months. It's the problem we had with Temple was 14 people should not have been making a game, or actually I think it was only a dozen, a game of that magnitude, of that scope. Something had to give, and what gave
Yep.
was story and just total playtime. And then we shipped with a lot of bugs, and that's all another thing. But basically, it should have been cut back, and that's true on many Mega games. They should have been scoped back. Outer Worlds, I think, was correctly scoped back. And I remember, even before we shipped, people on the team were like, aren't people going to complain the game is too short? And I remember saying, if that's what we get, if that's the complaint we get on this game, that it's too short, I'll take that. I'll take that over. It's massively buggy. It crashes all the time. It's imbalanced. It's not fun. Whatever.
Okay, I played Outer Worlds. I enjoyed it, although I think it was a little lacking in certain departments that I would have liked. One thing I did enjoy was the length of Outer Worlds. I did like it. I liked that, okay, the difference here is that usually like, oh, big open world RPG, make lots of choices, have lots of quests, is usually pitched as a here's how long it will take you to beat the game, right? Like I think Witcher 3 for me was like 150 hours to do everything. I've spent 200 hours in Starfield total. I like that the Outer Worlds was like, no, this is a bite-sized RPG, and you can kill anyone. There's nobody here who has immunity. I think except for like a couple of people, and I like that. I think that the game as a whole was a little bit forgettable, but what I did like was the attempt to make a smaller bite-sized RPG, and I'm looking forward to the second game. I hope that it can fix the things I didn't like about the first game while remaining a bite-sized RPG. Really enjoyed that. Good thing that happened to me is now I have the ability to design, prototype, and implement things really, really fast now, and now I know when to drop something if it doesn't fit or might be too hard to maintain. It's a good skill to have. It's a good skill to have. Limit those unknowns, right? And especially if you're prototyping, just do things dirty, do things quickly. The point of a prototype is to determine, is this fun? How much work is this going to take to do it properly? And is there anything that I didn't expect from this? And then when you recreate it, you do it properly. You're like, okay, I know exactly what to do now. I failed here, here, and here. I need to do it this way, this way, this way, and the code architecture needs to look like this. Boom, vertical slice version.
So I think that's the first thing I'm bad at. The second thing I'm bad at, which touches on that first one, is balancing game systems. So
I
not only
love
do I
balancing.
add too many in, I end up not balancing them. Backgrounds, traits, perks, skills, magic spells. Now I would be the first one to say I care more about fun than balance. But
He's right, because balance doesn't always mean balancing for power. Usually it means balancing for fun, right? Because that's the purpose of a game is to be fun, is to be enjoyable. You need to be entertained, and sometimes being entertained in some cases does mean making things fair. In other cases, I think, especially with single player games, it means giving the player oftentimes a bit of an edge. But it just depends. It depends on genre. It depends on game. It depends on the market. There's so many things. You can't define what game balance is, because then I'm going to ask you, well, okay, but what's the game? Who's the market for this? What's the purpose of this game trying to achieve? Is it a hardcore game? Is it a casual game? The balance is going to be dependent on so many different variables that I can't just tell you what good balance is. It really just depends. In my progression system in a way that enables me to easily balance things. Fun should be the main aspect. Yeah, fun can mean different things. There's a Steam Cooking Fest from November 12th to 19th if you want to try it. November 12th? Or YouTube, let me have a quick look. November 12th to 19th. I mean, it fits within a slot. I don't know. We'll see. November is already looking pretty fucked in terms of getting things done. Yes, but I don't know how long Dragon Age is going to take me. I'm willing to push into some days if it means finishing it. But then Stalker 2 comes out, and I'm going to be losing my fucking mind with Stalker 2. I hope it's God. I hope it's good. I'm just gonna like, okay, see a main quest. I'm gonna go explore some anomalies, get some trinkets, some artifacts. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
But there were just times where I didn't balance well enough. And we ended up with things like in Arcanum, that harm spell was just the best spell. It was everybody takes it. In Fallout, that nobody liked the gambling skill. It wasn't worthwhile, and there were some perks that just don't bother taking these. They're not powerful enough. Or we had a level cap of 20, but we gave you 2 perks at level 18. Have fun playing those for 2 levels. There were just things like that in all
Yeah.
my games that when I look back, I'm like, why did I do that? Why didn't I change that? And the answer is always the same. When you're prioritizing bug lists, balance never gets a high priority for me. I go after crash bugs. I go after you can't finish the game with this build. It either dies all the time when it gets to this level, or you end up needing to check skills that this particular build will never have. I look for things like the main story can't be completed by.
I mean, those are important, right? Those are like core loop bugs in some cases. I mean, crash bugs are highest priority. Bugs where you can't complete the main story, those are progression blockers. Those are bugs that should be critical priority. Fix those first, no questions asked. Do those. I agree. Although I think that with Tim, maybe it's possible that he was being put that he maybe he didn't have anybody to delegate to for balance, because balance is a very difficult skill. It's not something you can just do, and it's a lot of learned experience. I think we had a video about balancing previously. I think I turned that into an hour-long video. Either way, um, yeah, it's like if you're busy doing with these things, you need to delegate that balance to somebody who has the time for it, who can put their full effort into it, because it is a 100% brain power needed skill with a lot of tedium and testing. You need to have data, you need to have metrics, you need to see how different people play, because the way that you played as a developer, when you know how everything is handled, is very different from playtesters who are jumping into it and they've never touched your game. They don't know what's OP. They try things because to them it sounds fun. And if it's fun for them to play this, but it's really unbalanced, either it's too strong or it's too weak, especially if it's too weak and it's a single player game, they're going to be like, well, I took this perk, but it just wasn't good. And especially the balance of like the start of your game. If the start of your RPG that's like Fallout is favoring melee and strength because the player needs to escape some vault or some shit. Now anybody playing it who's like, "Oh, I'm going to be a stealthy tech build," and they just keep dying in the first 2 hours of your game because they can't escape the vault or something. It's not fun for them. Even if the rest of the game enables them to do that, you need to balance the game around those play styles. You need to say, okay, it's okay if maybe there's a way that you can hack in and find an alternate path. Maybe there's a person that you can convince with dialogue skills, right? So balance is incredibly important to the health of your game, the experience that players have, especially if you have multiple play styles. That's where it's going to be at, is balance.
By a certain build. So yeah, there's things like that just always prioritize on my list way above balance. The third thing I'm bad at is writing dialogue. I used to say writing, but now I say writing dialogue. And because here's what took me a long time to learn. My first few games, uh, uh, Grandstand Bridge, Bard's Tale construction set, Rags to Riches, I didn't write anything. I don't think there's a single line I wrote in that game, in any of those games. In Fallout, there were quests I suggested, but somebody else wrote. But then I wrote the opening cinematic, and that got so much praise that I'm like, I must be a natural writer. No, I was not. When Arcanum rolled around, I didn't have time to do writing. I basically made huge lists of quests, suggested quests, and how they would play out, but I didn't do any of them. That's why when a lot of you ask questions about Arcanum, I don't have the answer. I deferred to Leonard in both of those chats to answer questions about the quests. The but when I got to Temple, well, Leonard and Jason and Chad Moore and Sharon Shellman, they were all over on Vampire, and they wrote good dialogue and quests. So I thought I'll do it. So I wrote a lot of the dialogue along with Tom Decker on Temple, and they just weren't very good. Mine were not very good at all. However, I have learned that I can do lore text. I did a lot of it in Outer Worlds. I'm good at that. Short things. I can write cinematic narration, not conversation, not character
I
development.
feel the same way
Narrator
too.
doesn't have a character.
Yeah, the short
he doesn't
stuff,
have a
short
personality.
lore stuff.
So I'm good at that, but I'm not good at conversation, character building, writing. So I've learned to be precise and like I can do some narrative design, but not all. And then the last thing that I'm really bad at, contract negotiation. And that's something I learned at Troika, but then realized later I was bad at it even for my own personal negotiation. But let's talk about Troika. So on the very first contract for Arcanum, we used a lawyer and he caught a lot of things. But even then, there were things he and all of the three of us, Leonard, Jason, and I missed. The biggest one for Arcanum was digital rights. They're not included. It specifically says it's for physical boxed goods that are being sold. So I know it excludes things like digital sales, but I think it also excludes if there's ever, like if Arcanum plushies had come out, we wouldn't have gotten anything from that.
Oof.
And that was bad.
Yeah.
We did include it. We were smart enough to include it in the next ones. But the problem was we were negotiating both Temple and Vampire contracts while things were still happening. You know, we were still doing patches on Arcanum. After we had those new contracts, that's when we realized that the Arcanum contract and now the Temple and Vampire contracts did not include our right to make unofficial patches. So all three of those games, the same thing happened. Once the publisher had paid for a few patches, they didn't want to make any more patches. And on all three, we're like, great, we'll do our own patches. No. And we're like,
that's a sneaky one. That's a sneaky one, but I've seen that. I'm not going to name names, but there's definitely cases that I know of firsthand where, if they don't pay for a patch, you might not have the rights to release it. Like, you have to get permission for that. And that's a good one to think about. Name them. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to find out. It wouldn't be hard to find out where I've been discomforted with my work relationship. I'm pretty open. I don't want to name names, but just saying, I've been there. There's certain publishers I won't work with anymore.
we'll make them unofficial. No. And we were told we literally were not legally allowed to make patches, which is super frustrating and super annoying. But the worst part is you have fans telling us how we've abandoned our own games.
Yep.
You know. Oh, by the way, you're often not allowed to talk about contracts when you're under them because, I don't know, rights.
Fuck NDAs.
The one thing I wish I had added, the one line I wish I had added to all of those contracts, well, I probably couldn't get it for Temple of Vampire, but definitely for Arcanum, was IP reversion for non-use. You basically throw in a line that says,
if you guys don't use the IP in like a certain amount of time, that the IP then gets returned back to us, is what it says. The best way to do this is just don't sell your IP anymore. I don't think you need to do it anymore. At a certain point, it was pretty kind of standard to sell your IP. It's unfortunately the reason why you have some of the greatest IPs in like history, especially RPG history, are being owned by companies that don't do fuck all with them. Ultima, owned by EA. What is EA doing with Ultima? Absolutely nothing. And to be honest, I kind of don't want EA to do anything with Ultima. I don't trust EA to make a fucking RPG anymore.
if you end up not using this IP for 5 years, and maybe you let them negotiate you out to 10 years, then we get it back. What's great about that is if they say, nope, we're not going to do that. We're like, well, look at it this way. if it makes a lot of money and you're using it, we can't use it. But if you don't use it for that period of time, we get it. But what's the loss to you? You're not using it. You're literally not using it. It's the same thing. I had a friend negotiate a contract he was working on as an employee, and he said he didn't want to travel. And they're like, well, we can't guarantee, but we're almost positive you're not going to be traveling in this role. So he added a line and he said, if I travel, you have to pay for a first class ticket for me. And they were like, we're not going to pay that. And he goes, you just told me I wouldn't be traveling. So this clause will never get activated.
I love that. I love that. Of course they got upset at that.
So they agreed. He traveled twice his first year at that company. And what was funny is they had to pay first class and they were mad about it, but
I
he's
fucking
like,
love that. That's
you
great.
effectively lied to my face,
Yes.
and now
Yeah.
you're mad
No, he's right.
that you're the one paying for the lie. And that's what I wish I had done. I wish I'd had put in more clauses that were, this clause will do nothing bad for you, unless what you're telling me right now isn't true, in which case it kicks in.
That's such a good way to put it. I fucking love that. Oh man. Oh man. Yeah, I can say for sure that at Microraptor Games we're not gonna have like NDAs or anything. We will have like minimal for like like personal information with the company. Like I don't want you leaking information about like I don't know shit like that. But talking about the game, I don't give a fuck. Talk about the game. Be happy about the game. You make the game. You should be happy. You should share it. But nothing like that. And yeah, it's I want to be pro human with my contracts and shit like that. Never lie to my face. You have to pay me 100 mil and I get ownership back. Contract negotiations, fun stuff. Here's the thing: if you are actually looking out for the benefit of your employees, you should have nothing to worry about. You really shouldn't. And this his friend is proof of this. 100% proof. They lied to his face. They had to pay for it. Fuck them. Fuck them.
They don't want to admit they're lying to you, so they'll often...
Like I said, no crunch. And that's not just something we say. It will literally be in our contracts. Even if we ask it, you are legally authorized to say, no, it won't happen. Like, we're not going to do it. Crunch is not necessary to make a good game.
agree to that conditional clause.
You work your 40
and then when
hours, you go the fuck
happens,
home, and you enjoy your weekend.
Too bad. But guess what? I was terrible at that. I was also terrible at that for my own contracts. I never managed to negotiate royalty when I was at Carbine or bonus for sales or whatever for WildStar, even though other people there did. And I knew about it. And when I asked for it, they're like, At that point, I should have just left at that point, but I'm just really bad at personal negotiation. And you know what?
You could still, I get what you're saying, Dramox, but you might still need to crunch if you are really bad at planning and you sell a publisher a 2-year plan, milestone plan, when really it's going to take 3 years to make it. Just say I'm speaking from personal experience.
What? I know I've talked for 10 minutes,
Wasn't
but I'm
my
going to throw in 2 bonus things. These are game dev activities that I'm good at, but I hate doing. The first one was HR. I was the human resources person at Troika for the last couple of years. Sharon did it at the beginning, but eventually she left Troika to be a stay-at-home mom. They had 3 children. Sharon is Jason Anderson's husband. Great artist, did great HR. I took over. I was good at it, and I hated every moment of it. The paperwork for hiring, the paperwork for insurance, state and federal paperwork and reports. Oh my goodness. I don't even want to start. Since I was that person, I don't even want to start on the paperwork I had to do to shut Troika down. Troika was started by literally signing a piece of paper and paying a filing fee. Boom.
Yep.
Company exists. Shutting it down, nightmare. About 8 months of work, multiple state and federal paperwork and reports, rules that contradicted each other. One rule that said I had to do A, the other one said I had to do B, and A and B were exclusive. My programmer brain exploded.
Yeah, I don't want to do that shit either.
Then the other thing
that
I was good at and hated doing was accounting. I was basically, although maybe I shouldn't call myself that, maybe I should call myself Troika's bookkeeper. But again, for the last couple of years after Sharon left, I did all the bookkeeping and bill paying. at Troika. That's why I was between those two things, HR and accounting, is why I wasn't full time on Vampire. So that meant bills would come in, I'd confirm them, because occasionally companies will send you a bill that isn't really a bill. You didn't order this. You didn't ask for this service. They're just billing you for it and hoping you're pay.
I think I think that's still legal to do. I could be wrong. It might not be legal anymore. I like that guy that built Facebook, whatever, and made hundreds of millions. Yeah. No, I agree with him. Like, I would not. I don't want to do these things. I've already mentioned, like, it's like, oh, you're CEO. Okay, so you're gonna have to do like CEO stuff, like manage all the paperwork. No, I'm just gonna hire just somebody to do the paperwork. Fuck that. I know where I'm good at. I know where I will be most impactful and efficient, and it has nothing to do with running the business. That's why I will get somebody to do that part. I just want to make sure that the business is run in a way that doesn't fuck with our values and doesn't destroy the lives of our employees. That's why I want to be owner. Somebody else can manage the back end, the financials. You know, a CFO and an accountant can handle that.
They're legitimate bills. Sometimes you have to look at a bill and go, that's not due for another 3 weeks, and we get a big payment coming in a week. I'm going to put it off. You had to juggle stuff like that at a small company. I also did the QuickBooks, which we would then send to our accountant, who would make sure that everything was good and everything. He complimented at one point on how everything was accurate to the penny and categorically correct, that I was putting expenses in the right categories. It helped him out a great deal, and I'm like, I'm good at this. And then he'd leave from that meeting, and I'm like, and I hate doing it. I hated it. Every time something came up, and I knew the next hour or 2 hours or all the rest of the day, I'd be doing something with our books. I was just like, I just deflated a little bit. Another reason I didn't want to run a company. And by the way, I know there were a lot of comments, people, why didn't you just hire a business person? With what? We didn't have any spare money. The first year or two, Leonard, Jason, and I had to pay each other like half salaries. We had no money to hire a business person. Now, you might go, well, you'd hire a business person, then you can get more money. That's true, but it's a catch-22. I
wish it worked that way.
How do we hire a business person with money we don't have to then maybe get money that we could use to pay for a business person? Anyway, here's my bottom line with this. You know what? It's okay not to be good at everything. And it's okay to not like doing things that you're good at. The secret of all this is you have to find the intersection of things you like doing, things you're good at doing, and things that people will pay you to do. If you can do that, you're golden.
True.
For me, luckily, that was actually rolling up my sleeves and making games, either programming or design. I like doing it. I think I'm good at it. People will pay me to do it. It's a happy intersection. Find that intersection for yourself. You can be happy too.
I'm a game designer, which means that I like doing it, and I'm pretty good at it, but people won't pay me to do it. Yeah, you're not gonna make money as a game designer. Okay, you will. But game designers, generally, there's a lot of them. You don't need a lot of them. You only need a few on a team at maximum for most games. Within like the double indie to double A, and you don't get paid a lot. You don't make that much money as a game designer. But either way, it was another great video from Tim. We do have some stuff in common, although I do like to balance. Although I don't think that there's anything that I have recognized myself as being good at and that I like to do. But I'm a pretty stubborn individual. Generally, I only do the things that I like, but of course, you don't have that. You don't have that luxury sometimes, especially if you're looking to start up a studio. So sometimes there are things that it's just like, you know what, somebody's got to do them. I'm not very good at writing dialogue. I'm not really a big fan of it because it's just I'm slow and it's shit and the results are bad. But I got to do it. I got to do it because no one else is going to do it. Here's a link if you guys want to watch it yourself. And of course, below all the reactions to these, I do put the link to Tim's videos. So please go give him a sub and go watch his videos. He's great. and you won't hear me yapping for hours on end. So thank you for watching that one, YouTube. And I think I'll do one more today. It's a 17-minute video, though. Challenges facing game. You know what? I'm going to save that one because I just have a feeling I'm going to turn this into an hour-long video. And my voice is starting to go today. So thank you for watching that one. And I will call it there for today. So thank you, YouTube. See you guys later.